This is Anthony. Let's sit and talk. Today, still in Guatemala City. I'm out here on the patio. You can see me sharing space with my little friend behind me. And I think today, what I want to talk about today is balance. Um, and I want to take it from two perspectives. Now, this may trigger some people, but I think it's, there are realizations that need to be addressed or reviewed, however you'd like to look at it. When I talk about balance, I'm talking about the balance between emotion and logic, and how it affects men and women differently, and why it's so important to try to find that balance in emotion in order to really have a more peaceful, functional, and calm existence in life. You see, throughout life, both sexes, both genders, they experience things from different perspectives and different angles. And it's very clear to me, especially as growing up, when I was young, there was the quote unquote battle of the sexes, and then I think there was almost like a ceasefire or a peace at some point in life. And then it seems like the agenda again is to pit one side versus the other again. And this is to me, this becomes kind of a sad state of affairs, because what ends up happening is when in balance, male and female energies, they're quite harmonious. They work together, they create, they build, they have a peaceful and harmonious existence. However, what generally tends to happen, and this has happened, throughout our history, the balance is not maintained. For a large part of history, the balance swung to the side of the masculine, and then at some point, as women began to step into their power, the balance has now shifted completely to the other side. And reality is that the balance is in the middle, yet we've yet to find that balance. And it's difficult to find balance, especially when you've dealt with such extremes. Imagine a pendulum. If you take the pendulum and it swings to one side, well, it's got to swing to the other side and back and forth until it can kind of set and find its balance in between. It doesn't just go from one side and then straight into balance. Remember, energy requires balance. So if you look at this from an energetic perspective, the energy has to flow to the other side in order to balance out the energy. Okay? And the reason that this is important is because when you start looking at how both sexes process energy from a masculine and a feminine perspective, and again, when I have this conversation, this is not to point out how other people feel about how they internalize these energies. These two energies exist, and they exist in all beings. However you want to approach this discussion, they exist in all beings. And the state of desire is that balance between both masculine and feminine energies within. Once you find that balance, that is when you can find your state of homeostasis, and where your peace can come into being, to allow you to start to step back and view the things around you and inside of you in more of a balanced approach, not strictly looking at it from logical perspective, and also not handling things strictly from an emotional perspective. Now, because I'm in a male form, we're going to talk about the male experience in order to try to help those on the other side understand kind of the holy male experience, because I think that there's some misunderstandings about how things are experienced. For instance, I've heard a lot of women suggest that men have it easy, and the problem is that couldn't be further from the truth. And here's why. In society, there is this belief that men are not or should not be allowed to experience emotions. That our job is to think strictly logically and to think past the emotional state. And the only emotions that men are allowed to experience are really anger and aggression. However, this is a trend that has kept us locked into the state that we are today, where we have continued things like war and aggression, fighting, resistance. This is what creates that state, that stuffing of feelings, until the only way those feelings get handled or boiled up is through anger and aggression. I'm very familiar with this because a former version of me, that's how he experienced the world. And he saw everything through the frame of that experience, which again created in him, because he was not able to process all the terrible things that happened to him or me as a youth or as a child. It created this loathing inside, which spilled out onto everything around him. How he felt about people, how he felt about the world, how he viewed all things. It was strictly a action-reaction existence, and it wasn't a pleasant existence. Once I was able to release that energy, again, as we've talked about before, it's like a whole new being is here. Now, here's the issue. The issue is that society says that men aren't supposed to experience emotion, and that's incorrect. Men absolutely have every emotion that women have, and should experience those emotions. However, because society says it's not okay, society says that men are supposed to be the quote-unquote strong ones, and how strength is viewed is through the suppression of those emotions. That, quite frankly, is not the correct approach. Men need to experience emotions, the full range of emotions, because in that vulnerability and in that ability to be your truest self, that is where the strength and power actually exists. That is where you're able to overcome things like ego, and are allowed to really kind of see the experience as it's meant to be seen. I think for self, you can say, well, this is a family issue. It's not a familiar issue. You see, because my father and mother divorced at an early age, and I didn't spend a lot of time around my father, I didn't have a whole lot of male role models. So my role models came from people around me and things I saw and experienced as a youth around me. And all of those things gave me and told me that this was how a man was supposed to act. And, that brought me a lot of success in life, from that perspective, acting in that manner. It brought me a lot of the things that men are taught to chase, attention and praise and all of these things. And I think that part of the issue is that when society keeps perpetuating that same thing and saying this is what success looks like, we don't evolve. We don't change the status quo. We don't allow for men to be their truest self and heal, and then bring our balanced self to the table to solve and resolve issues in a more harmonious manner. And to be honest with you, that's a problem. It retains a problem, and I'm going to bring up the part of the reason why on the feminine side is because now women in life, you've come from the emotional aspect, experiencing more of the emotions, and you're taught to express your emotions, and you're taught to be more accepting of the male aspect. The logic comes in smaller doses after the emotional experience has been expressed. And there's an issue with that. Again, without balance, then you end up being ruled by the emotion. And when you're ruled by the emotion, then it's a state where emotions come and go, thoughts come and go. Thoughts create emotions. If you don't heal the things that are creating the emotions, then you get stuck in this perpetual state of the same thing where men are, where you are ruled by the emotions, which means it's easy to predict your reactions, and you become easier to control. And this is just a state that we've been in throughout our history. You can deny that, but just go look at our history and how men have been treated and how women have been treated, and how, to be quite honest, I think in this day and age, as we begin our awakening and we begin to evolve, we start to see hasn't been acceptable for either side. It has not been our most harmonious state, and I think we are, reaching a time in our human history where it is time for us to reach that next level of evolution, that next state where we can work together in a harmonious manner. And I think we're required to work together in a harmonious manner, because that is when our best and truest versions appear. But in order to do that, it requires the feminine side to be able to balance with the masculine side, so they are not completely ruled by emotion and can understand and accept logic as well. You see, logic isn't the answer, and emotion isn't the answer. The answer is the balance. That is the beauty of the human experience. Being able to take the emotion along with the logic and bring it to balance to come up with the truest and best approach and answer to really anything that arises in life. That is what creates the greatest ability to create. That creates the greatest ability for harmony and peace. And as issues arrive, solving those issues, creating a multitude of solutions for the things that ail the world, versus it's this one or that one. You see, it's no different than everything else that you see and get experienced in the world. Duality. And it's finding the balance in the duality, which is what opens up the door to a multitude of options, choices, and solutions for you to create a better existence for self, for a better understanding of self. And these are baby steps. These aren't big jumps. You don't just wake up one day and you're balanced. Even in my experience, I journaled this morning about how I feel like, at times on this walkabout, I've started to feel more of a block or a disconnection. But then as I explore that more, I'm starting to maybe understand that it's not a block or disconnection. What it actually is, I'm ready for a greater level of connection. And the connection that I had achieved before, which seemed like it was a vast amount, it has now felt like a trickle. And I'm ready for something greater and something more. And that's actually, that's nothing that's scary. That's actually a beautiful thing to feel. I understand now why I have felt like there has been a block. It's because I've stayed in the state where I have been and not continued to open myself up to receive more, understand more, and grow more. You see, the soul's evolution is, if it's not the sole purpose, it is one of the main purposes for our existence here, to know thyself. It's to be able to understand that we are unconditional love, and to be able to seek that unconditional love in existence. Consider this: when you are acting in a selfish manner, who benefits? The majority of benefit is to self, but when you act in a service to others' perspective, not only do you benefit, but everyone around you benefits. And in order to be in that state, balance is required, so that you're not over-giving on one side, but you're not being overly self-serving on the other side. That is the way, that is the walk. And so again, in order for us to kind of achieve that next level, it is time to look in the mirror and see that the places in our lives where we are not balanced, we have not been balanced, and where we can bring more balance and peace to self. For men, that is being able to express emotions more, and having the partners and friends and the feminine energy in their life to be accepting of that, and still find that to be strength and be attracted to that, versus being repulsed by that, because that is kind of what the modern society has told us should be done. And on the flip side, it's for women to sit with the emotion before expressing it, examine the emotion, try to understand the emotion in a more meaningful way before expressing the emotion. You see, even psychology says when you have an emotional reaction, you should wait somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes, because that's the length of time that it takes for that emotion to actually come up and pass through you in order for you to see a situation more clearly. And when you're able to do that, then you're able to almost examine the emotion and react more of, quote unquote, your better version or your better self, and more of a version of peace, calm, and being able to reflect solutions, reflect love, unconditional love, in a more meaningful manner than just expressing the emotion that you're having. So I'm curious, for both sides, how do you experience that on this plane? I mean, have you learned to balance, or do you still feel more like you're ruled by one side or the other? From my male audience, do you feel like you still suppress? Do you feel safe in expressing those emotions, or is that still difficult for you? And for my female viewers, do you still feel ruled by emotion, or do you feel like you're to a state where you can examine the emotion and start to try to understand where that emotion is emanating from, in order to better understand what is actually occurring inside of you, that maybe an event is triggering for your review, so that we can both meet in the middle and find that balance, not only in self, but in the world around us. So again, what say you? I'm curious. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. I very much enjoy interacting with you. I appreciate those who have commented. It's really, I've enjoyed interacting with you. It brings me a lot of, I mean, you bring up very good points, and I am accepting of all those. And as always, if you enjoy this comment, please like, share, and subscribe. I am grateful. Until I talk to you again, peace, love, light. Hope you have the most amazing day.